Present. Pat Lewis, John Cacchione, myself, Ed Leonard, alternate members, Mark Perkins and Ben Bueller. Staff present, planning and development and zoning official Susan C. Cullen, administrative assistant Cheryl Consavage.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You please would, John.
Do we have any additions to the agenda? Public comment? Item 6, workshop. Mark Perkins to discuss a possible text amendment for commercial, agricultural activities and residential zones.
But I suppose. How about now? Okay, well, I'm gonna stay away from it if that's at all possible. So, everybody bear with me. I'm not sure how to go about this, but, we discussed it we went over it quickly last meeting, I think it was 2 months ago, in regards to, I think there's a potential here somewhere in town, and not only for me, but there are other areas we've looked at. There are 40, I put here, 40 acres of land, whatnot. And I guess what I'm trying to accomplish here is that there's a lot of gray area in our regs. So as far as if I opened up a nursery on my property on Lantern Hill Road, and I wanted to grow shrubs there, grow arborvitaes, whatnot, rhododendrons, things like that. And I also own, as we all know, a landscape company. Is if there would be a way to make those two be able to operate in conjunction in a residential zone. So because as our regs I've read through, they do allow for agricultural use. I can start a nursery, grow, sell, whatever shrubs, trees, whatever you'd like off of that property. And so I guess I found nowhere in the regs that would allow me to do what I'm hoping to do. There's gray area where I see it being an option and getting, I don't want to say ways around it, but there are ways that it could work. So I took the time to jot down just some things that I thought could be part of it. I'm not even sure where it would fit in the regs, whether it would go under landscape business or whether it would go under agriculture or whatnot. So basically, what we can do is read through it, and then I guess we can kind of try to have a dialogue and see what everybody thinks. So the following exceptions for allowances for commercial activity in a residential zone will be allowed on parcels greater than 40 acres, whereas at least 40 acres of the parcel must reside in the town of North Stonington. That could be that we're not stuck on that acreage. Could be 30, 50, 40, whatnot. I think the list we pulled up, Susan had there's maybe around 100 properties or so that fit in that category. Okay. The number of employees that may be involved in the commercial activity. And I just want to preface this, but any of the numbers that I put here are just space holders. If, this is something that we want to continue to look into that can be changed or, modified. The number of employees that may be involved in the commercial agricultural activity may be no greater than 10, provided that the area where the employees park and muster is approved by the commission is in compliance with the following conditions. area must be a minimum of 500 feet and not visible from any street or abutting property line. And that can also say abutting, residents. The commission may request additional fencing, dense vegetation to be added to provide for year-round screening. Employees are not allowed to muster prior to 7, nor remain on the property beyond established working hours unless responding to some sort of an event, an extreme weather event, a flood, a hurricane, something where so there needs to be some work done to the farm. Number of daily vehicle trips in excess of 26,000 GVW, which would be your CDL class vehicles, be limited to 8 per day. Vehicles under 26,000 will be allowed to access property throughout daily operations. Outdoor storage in an area no greater than 15,000 square feet may be used for outdoor storage of equipment and materials. Area must not be within 500 feet or visible from any roads or property lines and must be fully shielded from both. Area, type, and amount of material and equipment to be stored on property must be approved by the commission at wetlands and the storage area affects and the wetlands if the storage area affects wetlands. Equipment stored on the property must be in direct correlation to farming or landscaping services and may not be associated with any other types of operations such as snow plowing, construction, plumbing, electrical, or other trades outside of the scope intended. In the event the property is accessed in a shared driveway, pentway, laneway, there will be an agreed upon maintenance agreement between the town and the owner. Area will not be used for commercial sales on site, and only work vehicles will be allowed to enter and exit the site during business hours. There will be no on-site commercial sales allowed to general public. Indoor storage, there will be an area no greater than 5,000 square feet of inside building shop space to allow for inside equipment storage and repair. Building must be 500 feet from all public roadways, property lines, and must shield it from both. Any repairs performed or work performed inside the building is to be direct correlation with the commercial, agricultural, landscape operations. I know I continue to use commercial agricultural, and that's not really like a term that we do use in our regs. But because at this point, the way it reads in the regs, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, I can turn that into a nursery. I can grow shrubs and trees and plants and whatnot, and I could open it to the public to drive out there and buy out of my farm store, my farm, farm stand. I'm trying to do the opposite. I'm looking to be able to grow plants, trees, shrubs, excavate them from the ground out back, and then sell them to the public, or I bring them to them, limiting, where it was an fully active nursery where, the general residents could come out. It could be, I don't know. I think you're increasing traffic and whatnot. So, and as far as the setbacks there, again, I think, because I know the issue will be brought up of, if you're in a residential zone, people buying a residential zone with the thought of not looking in their backyard and seeing excavators or whatnot, or tractors. I think why I tried to choose a larger area of land and you could even put a bigger setback than 500 feet, 1,000 feet. So if those setbacks are adhered to, and you have a neighbor, and that neighbor is 750 feet, 1,000 feet away, I don't think any of that general activity will affect their residential living. By putting a larger acreage on it, I thought that would keep it from being put into, I don't know, the village or Kingswood, Meadowwood, or, some of the more, there's a lot of dense populated areas in town, but to keep that area a little quieter. So I'm curious as to, I know not all the commission members are here, but it's something that, I don't think our regs fully cover, but if this doesn't go through, like I said, there's nothing stopping me or somebody else from just opening up a nursery and changing all the vehicle names to Perkins Nurseries and operating out of there and digging shrubs, digging plants, and planting them on somebody else's property anyway. Like I said, I don't want it to be an excavation type of situation where, I'm in that process of cleaning, up now where it's a little more of an excavation area, but it's more, I'm trying to find a way for this to work and not have to I know for a fact that there's other people that are looking at other areas, tracts of town that are looking to do the same thing in our town, but our town technically doesn't allow under this guidelines, but it can be done in other, there can be other angles taken at it for it to happen. So I'm curious as to the commission questions they have, thoughts they have to see if this is, how we can, or if we can make this viable. And, as far as my tract of land personally, I'm on that fence of whether I'm looking to turn it into a nursery and grow trees, or I'm gonna drop 120 units of affordable housing on it, whether it be a trailer park or houses. And I'm going down both avenues, trying to decide what I want to do. But so I've thought in the meantime, I could bring this to the commission and see what they thought, if they had any questions, comments, concerns, to see if this is something that's viable to maybe mold a little bit better and to go forward with. No, I think you could do like 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday, maybe some morning hours on a Saturday, but not a Sunday, I mean, there again, Pat, a lot of these times, like I said, they're kind of open for interpretation. I mean, I think typical working hours are what, 7 to 5 would be normal. I don't know if we have any other hours somewhere in our regs that are, what we work off of, but. Okay, so what are those, Cheryl? Like 7 to 4, 7 to 5, something like that? No holidays and no Sundays? Yeah. So something along those lines, Pat, no Sundays, no holidays, no whatever type of a thing. I understand that, and that can be added, but I would a retort to that, I guess, would be they're moving their business here, which means they're moving equipment here, they're moving everything else here, which increases our tax base. But I don't know, but the traffic thing, that's why I'm saying it wouldn't be a commercial sales come to the property. It would only be vehicles associated. But there again, that's something that could be added. I mean, typically in most working environments, once you've left wherever area your yard for the day or whatever you want to call it, you're typically at work for the day. So there's not a high traffic flow, but there's nothing saying we can't limit the trips of smaller vehicles to a number. I just, like I said, this is just something that I jotted down to try to, because like I said, as it currently states, I mean, I could open up a farm stand out there and I could grow shrubs, and there's no stipulation as to how many vehicles can go out there, and I could sell to the public, and you and Ben and John and everybody, Ed, can drive out there all day long and buy whatever I'm growing, trees, or if I decide, what if I want to turn 30 acres of it into Christmas trees for 6 weeks in November, December, there's 1,000 cars going out there. And if that's under agriculture, I can do it without even having to add this. So what I'm trying to do is to find a way to work with the commission to be able to find a way to.
Basically, you want to marry the two things together. Because
Correct.
right now, you could go down the road.
Correct. And I understand that, and I guess, yeah. But that's being abused because there's nothing in place to keep it from abusing it, right? I mean, because what I'm saying is that if this is something that the commission says, no, this doesn't work for us, and I open up Perkins Nurseries.
Well, you can do that right now.
I understand that.
You've got the two landscape companies right next to Mystic Pizza, and that's in a commercial zone.
But
Zoning it.
I get that. But what I'm saying is nothing would stop me from opening Perkins Nurseries and doing everything that I'm saying on here, but without any, there are no regs as to me being able to do that. To limit it. There's nothing limiting me from absolving Perkins Lawn Care, opening up Perkins Nurseries, leaving all the trucks that say Perkins Nurseries. And every day I can work on that property as Perkins Nurseries. I can load trees and shrubs into the back of those Perkins Nursery trucks, and I can take them off site and I can plant them. There's nothing stopping me from that in these regs. That's what I'm saying, is that the only difference is I'm saying I'm trying to do it as Perkins Lawn Care and Perkins Nurseries as a subsidiary or whatever. But if that's something the commission doesn't want to do, then I'm fully prepared just to close Perkins Lawn Care and open Perkins Nurseries, do this and do exactly what I'm saying. And when I'm doing that, now there's no regulations on what I can and can't do out there.
You can't run a commercial lawn care off that property. That regulation is in place. That's why those two people are over there in a commercial area.
I understand that,
That's
but
the only thing you can't do. You're trying to marry the two together. So if you want to start your growing trees and stuff tomorrow, you can.
okay, but
There's nothing stopping.
I understand that, but part of that is, and part of it would be a landscape business. I would be,
It's not a landscaping business.
when you're
You
planting
have-
trees-
Landscaping is when you have a business like they do and you go out and you do landscaping. They don't grow any trees there. They have a landscaping business. They have snow.
So
They have meat
so if
That is why they have
Yes.
to be in a commercial zone. And
They could,
I-
because they're in an agricultural zone.
so anywhere in the town, you can do agriculture. But you can't do landscaping anywhere in town, which is why the folks that have landscaping businesses and snowplow businesses and are storing road salt and things like that, and storing gravel mulch, the things that are part of those businesses. And those are in the commercial zones in town, closer to, the southern sort of third of town. They're in several of those zones there.
but what,
So 112 are over 50 acres, and there are 136 parcels over 40 acres that would be in the R80, that if this went into effect as a text amendment, it would affect that many properties. And if you went forward and you decided tonight, just as a matter of procedure, if you decided tonight that you thought that this was an interesting thing, that you thought it might be consistent with the long-term plan of conservation and development, and you wanted Mark to come back and move this forward in the sense of having, a formal application to do a text amendment to your zoning regulations, then what you would have to come back and consider is within the POCD, was this an effective means of being consistent with the POCD? So you would look like in section 77, when you talk about the objectives and strategies of protecting and enhancing the natural resources and heritage of North Stonington. And so you'd have to talk about whether or not this was consistent with limiting the number or location or prohibiting uses that contribute to undesired increase in traffic, road widening, light pollution, or noise pollution. You'd have to talk about, does this engage in proactive planning to ensure that the future plans, and the need to preserve North Stonington's character, does it preserve and support farming and our agricultural heritage? So, you start down the line of if this wanted to be considered and you came forward and you had you'd have to have a formal public hearing, and you'd have to decide as a commission if this was consistent with those regulations. Now, right now, I know that Cheryl added into the packet our home occupation regulations. Now, our home occupation regulations here in North Stonington give sort of a bridge. So when people start small businesses, and small businesses comprise, over 85% of our businesses in town. I think we all think about the headlines of our biggest farms, our biggest pieces of business in terms of restaurants or farms or whatever it is. But actually, our small businesses comprise over, a huge portion of our business taxes, income, generation of services in town. So in those home occupation regulations in chapter 10, it talks about how you can, sort of bridge that gap of if you're at home and you want to decide, you're going to start a little business and it might be something small. You might be doing, taxes at your kitchen table for the first 3 years before you can actually go out and get yourself a shingle of an actual office and be, a tax accountant full-time. So there are lots of things that are, within these regulations that we do allow for. But a lot of it has to do with not disrupting the neighborhood, right? We talk about not having extra noise, extra odor, extra vibration, unsightly conditions, things that are going to change the character of the neighborhood. Because when you come to North Stonington and you are in that R80 zone, I think most people in a 2-acre zone, that there's going to be agriculture, there are going to be farms, there are going to be larger tracts of single family homes. You're not expecting to have, a lot of other things going on in that zone. And I don't think that that's an unreasonable, thing either. We also do allow for a few more things in number C, which is that commercial services. So for example, landscaping and contractors. So we do actually allow, and we do have a few of these that seem to operate, pretty consistently. These are very small time folks who are doing one non-resident vehicle parked on a site, no more than 3 vehicles in excess of 26,000 pounds. That no matter what vehicles and equipment, they have to be stored out of sight of the neighbors. So this goes back to that being consistent with the character of the neighborhood, not disrupting the character of the neighborhood, or, having neighbors think, oh, wait a minute, why did I buy this nice house in the country and now there's a 7-Eleven next door? I'm just, being funny. But the number 5 in that has to do with commercial services, home occupations not being permitted on a parcel with a shared driveway. Now, this is one of the difficulties with the piece that Mr. Perkins has, because he comes off of that Hyde Mill Pentway. So he has that shared driveway coming in. He doesn't actually have any road frontage. So that limits him, that even if he wanted to do a home occupation in a small time way there, that would be difficult because he can't actually, conform to number 5 of that home occupation rules. So even if he wanted to do something in a small time way, we can't grant that permit because he can't meet all the criteria. So these are the things that you would need to, start to talk about and consider if you wanted to move forward. It's a much more formal, sort of situation to do a text amendment to the regulations. And you would have to decide if you felt that that was consistent with the long-term plan of the town. And that was consistent for the blueprint that the Planning and Zoning Commission felt was appropriate for the town. And so that's, a big part of your charge here as the Planning and Zoning Commission. So what Mr. Perkins had asked us in the office was if he came in and did a workshop and, sort of, got out some of his ideas on paper of what he was thinking about doing. Then he could get a sense from you folks if you thought that you would consider something like that, if he should move forward to the next step of putting in a formal application or not. So that's why he's here this evening. This isn't a formal public hearing. This isn't, we haven't advertised or had the public here. We haven't gotten into the finer details of maybe what he'd like to do because we haven't gotten to that level. But those would be the things that you would need to do if you wanted to consider this going forward.
I did, yes. So see commercial services, it says off-site. Does that insinuate that if you lived on site, you would have different allowances?
So a home occupation means that you have a home there and you live there.
Right.
And that you would be performing that smaller size business
But this
there
says-
and then going to other people's houses to do their landscaping or their
So this
contracting,
just means
and then
that
coming
the
back home to your own
work
home.
you're performing is off-site of the
Of your own
property.
home. Yes,
You live on the property.
you would
It's
live
not
on the
a-
property. That's one of the
An
premises of a
open
home
lot
occupation.
or not an open lot, but a parcel of land without your dwelling.
No, a home occupation
Yeah.
states you have to live on the dwelling.
So do you have to live on the dwelling to do commercial agriculture?
So we don't really have that word commercial agriculture, so they
Except in
would,
the definition.
so they would have to figure out like, where does that fit within the definitions either that we already have, or
Right.
do we add a new something, or?
Definitions have commercial farm in there, but it's never
So-
used within the regulation.
So we would probably,
Except for
that might be
where
one of the things that needs to be
Yeah,
squared
except
away.
for the allowance for greenhouses. That's the only other place it shows up.
And we're certainly not saying that our
Yeah.
regs are
Oh, yeah,
perfect
no.
either. That, you know, sometimes when these things come up, these are opportunities to say, oh, wait a minute, we don't have a definition for this or a definition for that. And maybe this is the moment to make sure that we take care of that.
Right, I think this is a good opportunity to look at commercial farm. Getting something in there. I know there are lots of commercial farms, so as soon as we start to do that, it brings in a lot more than just Mr. Perkins's situation. So
I got a question. Can you tell me what you consider a commercial farm?
all the definition is a farm producing farm products for sale by wholesale or for sale at locations, parentheses, not including farmers markets, and parentheses, other than the farm property on which they are produced.
Which is what I
So
was
like
trying to say, John, is I could,
It's like a tree farm. But I mean, you're talking actual agriculture, not like,
Well, then you
Gravel
go
or
to
something like
farm,
that.
yeah, not gravel.
All right.
no, not gravel.
Like
No, this would be
banging
growing,
rocks and
this would be
beach.
growing
tract of
rhododendrons
land
and
used
azaleas
princi-
and arborvitaes and whatnot. And by that definition, I could grow them, sell them and plant them off-site.
Farm products, just two definitions later, are any products of agriculture, including fruits, vegetables, mushrooms, shells, nuts, shell, eggs, honey, or other bee products, maple syrup, flowers, nursery stock, Christmas trees, other horticultural commodities, livestock products, including milk, meat, cheese, and other dairy, food products of aquaculture. It's very broad. So that's, I think, where we're missing is putting any limitations on commercial farming. But I know that is going to be a very broad impact, way more than just the people who have 40 acres.
And I guess, Ed, that's kind of back to your point, you're like landscaping. So if you hire Perkins Nurseries to say, I want you to plant whatever, 100 trees around the farm, and I come there and I dig them up from my property, and I bring them there and I plant them to you. Am I a landscaper to you, or what am I? That's, okay, so that's exactly what I'm trying to say is that, but that's landscaping, installing shrubs and plants and beds and all that. That's part of landscaping. It is. I mean, that's. No, see, no, that's grass cutting. That's a lawnmower. An actual landscaping is
Lawn
like,
care business.
a lawn care business is one thing. Landscaping is installing shrubs and trees. And I mean, you can look up the definition. There's a difference between like a lawn mowing business and a landscaping company. So what I was trying to say is,
I don't think there is.
no,
in
I don't
our
know. I don't know.
regs.
I'm not saying that our regs there is, but what I'm saying is that as our regs, because they're so broad, you know, like Ben said, with that definition of
Farm product
commercial farming and
and
farm products,
commercial farm.
I could do exactly what I just said. You could hire me. I could open a nursery. You'll never see a Perkins Lawn Care truck again. Continue to do the same things I'm doing now, planting shrubs, growing shrubs, things of all that nature, under the guise of a nursery. So,
The nursery you're growing and stuff, so I don't understand under the guides. I mean, I don't know why you gotta, your crux of what you're doing. I mean, I think you're really peeling the onion pretty close as far
a bunch of 100 arborvitae's for me, I don't know that that's really lawn care or anything.
It's
That's
not-
the last
it's
time I
landscape-
ran it. Let me finish. God, everybody lets you talk. Stop fucking in. Everyone talk. I go, I pay you for doing the job. You drive away and never see you again. How is that any lawn care? You know what I mean? You're just putting them in the ground. It's a job, you grew them, and I'm paying you for them, and you put them in the ground, you drive away, so that's not lawn care to me. Telling you.
Right.
And as far as Ben, you don't wanna start getting too.
Oh,
nitty-gritty
absolutely.
About farms and what's going on.
Yeah.
Because the only time when we have problems is when people abuse it. Right now, nobody's abusing it.
Right.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So if you're gonna have it that on every Wednesday at 6 o'clock, you're gonna stop farming, well then who's gonna police it?
Exactly.
Thing is, it's not broke, don't fix it, you know, because if you start critiquing things too much,
Mhm.
then you're gonna make a mess.
Actually, that's an ordinance, right? You can write the farm ordinance.
Oh, yeah,
No,
exactly.
We have that now.
Yeah.
Well,
That's-
state has it too. State and,
Okay. So,
I have a question though.
Okay.
So what's to stop all the landscapers we have on the commercial around the Rotary or down in Foxville from just saying, okay, I'm just gonna go buy, 40 acres of land and get rid of, sell my commercial property for big bucks and do all my business there.
Because
I think we have it on purpose to be there, because even though it may not generate a lot of traffic for a reason, those roads are made to handle commercial traffic. So compared to, the back roads. So what's to stop them? They don't live here, but they could serve anybody, come in and buy 40 acres of land and move a commercial business with all their trucks and everything and say, gee, this is wonderful. I don't have to have this. I don't have to pay taxes in the commercial zone anymore.
So my answer to that is if there's a piece that's down the road for sale, I'd move Perkins Lawn Care down there.
Yeah.
Perkins Lawn Care would still be at Lantern Hill Road every single day, every morning, every night, all throughout the day, going in and out, getting shrubs, picking up everything else that's there from, I don't care if you want to call it Perkins Nursery there, Perkins Lawn Care buys from
Or even
Perkins
you
Nursery.
pick it up, I mean, the thing would be is that you have a greenhouse and you're raising trees, but your snow plowing and weed whacking stuff would be on the commercial side. And I got one question for you, out where you are in the Ledger North Stonington area, do you have a house there?
No. No,
I didn't know.
no. I'm going to be building a house on the Ledger. It's a weird connection. It's like 85 acres in North Stonington. There's the Lantern Hill Brook, and then I own like 3 acres in Ledger. So I do have road frontage, just not in North Stonington. I have about 600 or 700 foot of road frontage in Ledger. And it's all, it's all my property, but I don't have any road frontage in North Stonington. I wanted to correct that a little bit, because it's still road frontage. But
well, they're separate parcels at this time.
I understand that, yeah.
I'm not saying that you couldn't, that there might not be legally a way to combine them in the future if you had an appropriate crossing across the brook. That probably is possible. Or you might be able to build a road from the Ledyard side into North Stonington with a crossing and have frontage that would count, because it would be direct
Yeah.
frontage to that lot. But those are steps that don't really have to do with this text amendment. And the text amendment would have, bearing on those, 100 or 150, depending on how many acres of all of those lots in the R80, not just Mr. Perkins' property. So I know that, a lot of our details here that we're talking about have to do with your specific business. But what's really important overall for the commission is to realize what that effect could be if your business, as you show, in your draft, if that popped up on those 112 properties that were, over the 50 acres, what would that be? Would that be consistent with their long-term plan? Would that be appropriate for the town? And so that's something that they have to think about. And it's probably unlikely that that would happen on every single piece, but it's possible. And so you have to think about, that in terms of, the biggest case scenario of how it could be used. And not just from you, and they might know you, or they might know, how your business runs, but someone else might run their business a little bit differently. And if it was still within the realm of those regulations, it might have different effects. So that's something that you folks would need to do. Now, tonight, we're here really, this is a workshop. This is just to talk about it. This is just a concept. And so, what we need to know from the commission is whether or not Mr. Perkins should, bring in a formal application for a text amendment. Would you folks consider something like this? Do you think that this is worth pursuing? Or if you have feedback for him of, oh, we would pursue it, but we think that these things, you should look at these things, or like Pat had talked about, like the hours, is it worth it to say something about the hours within your amendment? Or if someone else said something about, anything that you have with specific feedback that you should give to Mr. Perkins, so that when he, if he came back with a formal application, that he would address those things. Because once he comes back with a formal application and you advertise that application, you can vote on it as it is, or you can vote on it to be more restrictive than it is. But if it were to become less restrictive, you have to start that iterative loop all over again. So it's sort of important to give, some constructive feedback now, if you want him to go forward, on what else you'd like to see within, his wording, or if there are things that you think he's left out, or if you think that he's gone too far on something or not gone far enough. These are important things to tell him now, because once he comes back in with a formal application, it's not as easy to adjust. Okay?
I think on number 3, Mark, when you got the event, in the event property is accessed by a shared driveway, pentway, and laneway, them words there. I think one issue you're gonna come up with is kind of like what we're doing with seasonal lakes. That bill that's the HB 5219, the Public Act one I handed out. That would put responsibility on the neighbors as well to access that, to maintain it. You wouldn't be able to go into an agreement with the town to repair. So something like that. So like, I get you share with somebody else there, right?
Yeah.
So if your vehicles in this situation were to mess up that road, both towns could go to them for a cost too as well. So that's something to consider, because even though that bill states that we would all have to pay. So if we all lived on that pentway and it got destroyed, emergency vehicles couldn't get out, they're gonna go after Ed, Cheryl, me, Pat, and you to get that road
Yeah,
fixed.
I guess.
So
that
that's
could say
something there
more
that
like, yeah,
would
so
be-
instead of a maintenance agreement with the town, it'd be like a maintenance agreement with the other residents of the shared driveway. I don't know why, I'm not sure.
Right, because that bill says it's gonna be maintained by them on that driveway.
Yeah.
But like I said, if they're running a Chevy Volt down the thing.
Yeah.
3 times a week, 4 times a week, and you're running bigger equipment down there, that would be a hard pill for them to swallow.
Right, I think that's why
You know.
he's proposing that there needs to be an agreed maintenance,
When
maintenance
I would
agreement,
just refer you back
assuming
to that
that-
HB
Yeah, I would be-
5121
Does
right
that say
there.
it required to
I'll have to
equally
do
be
it, yeah.
equally split?
Yeah,
Or does
if you
this,
read
would
it.
this override this maintenance agreement, assuming that
The state's gonna
business,
take precedence, I would believe. That'd be something for the attorney, but
commercial
that state
aspect.
bill would probably take precedence over
would have a larger.
over it right at this point.
Yeah, say no shared. Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's the rule. I don't see bending that rule. Driveway, it's not in good shape. That's your problem. Your equipment, that's your problem, whatever. And now you're putting other people out, but then you don't like them. And what the problem is, whatever, it doesn't matter. I'm just trying to keep the town from being arrested.
If it's not shared, then you need to have a driveway where you're having 10 employees going back and forth during the day, and you're creating dust. And if you have more than one of these parcels on a back road, you have, let's say, 3 of these commercial things on the back road, you have all that. I just don't think it's fair to the neighbors.
Right, and
But
my understanding of those words was to make sure there was an agreement with those neighbors that the
Not necessarily
property
just- Not just a
with-
shared driveway, I mean, any
Yeah,
driveway,
any-
they're gonna create a lot of dust
yeah,
for 10 people going back and forth on a dirt driveway and big trucks, it's just. you
Right.
know.
it's to have a formal agreement that the people using the road at a disproportionate rate would have it increased responsibility for the maintenance. That's how I understood. That's how I read the intent of what he was writing.
And what I just don't know what he said.
Yeah,
Right, but right here, we have regulation. And that's changed.
Can,
That's it.
but this would be commercial farming,
But this
not
would
commercial
not be
services
commercial.
or home occupancy.
right. It would be commercial farming. Commercial.
I'm saying even if the landscape business was there, and it was just the nursery, it would still be commercial farming, so there would still be
Right.
going up and down that driveway, going up and down that road, the dust would still be there. All these issues that Pat is bringing up would still exist.
If
except
we don't
there-
have
If we
these,
don't
right.
have this, they
This
would
is
still
trying to
exist.
limit
So then
that.
why are you here trying to change the rules? What you're adding-
I'm not trying to, I'm not, I mean, I'm trying to I don't know, I guess tighten it up a little bit, because all of Pat's concerns that she's already raised, that
I think
all,
they all exist.
that all can exist tomorrow. If I want to turn that into a nursery, if I put, but I put a site plan in and I'm gonna get approved for a site plan because it's commercial farming. There's nothing in our regs anywhere that says anything about how much time I can go up and down the driveway, how I can access a shared driveway with commercial farming. We have the definition of commercial farming in our regs, but we have no texting, no text, no regs to bound it. There is no, and not for nothing, if I'm the first one to do it and people see that can be done, I'm not gonna be the last. I know the whole, like, don't shake the apple cart, right? I mean, I get that, man. That's half the town's problem is we never shake the apple cart and then things come rolling down the road and then it's too late. And we talk about not wanting to spend time and resources with Susan running around. Well, it's either time and resources with Susan running around there, or I do what I'm saying I'm gonna do, and then 5 other people see me do it, they do it, and now the town's in 5 different court battles battling on whether or not it's a commercial farm, which we have in our regs, or if it's a landscaping business, or if it's an excavation business, or if it's a lawn mowing business. And then we're wrapped into 5 different court battles, paying attorneys, paying Susan to run around.
See, Mark, you're going about this the wrong way. As you keep saying you steal, you keep threatening
No.
to put in, no, please, I'll let you talk. That's my thing. You threaten to put in affordable housing. You threaten to put in trailers. You threaten to go and do this anyhow, and then, 5 other people that are gonna come in and do it. The whole idea is not to go and threaten people when you're trying to do something. You're trying to explain why what you want to do is gonna make it better for the town and stuff. All you can do is say, I can do this, I can do that. Well, I'm sitting here listening to you. If you can go do it, then go do it, and then we'll get a lawyer.
No, but Ed, what I'm trying to say is I'm not trying to threaten. What I'm trying to do is expose that there is that void in the regs. Okay? I'm not threatening anybody with affordable housing. I love this town. I really don't want to build that. Okay? But I have to, but it wasn't said with a threat. I don't want any more houses in this town if I have to, but I'm trying to find a use for this property. Okay? So I'm trying to explore this use above other uses.
So then grow your trees, don't put them on other people's property, and move your lawnmower business to a commercial area, and that's it. You're trying to do both on the same piece of property.
But Ed, what I'm trying to say is there, no matter what, so there will be overlap on that. There, no matter what, trucks will look the same going in and out of there. That's the problem that it's gonna arise, is that,
Yeah, but you're not gonna be pulling out at 2 in the morning to go plow.
no, I've never mentioned snow plowing. I've never once said snow plowing. I've said,
I'm just bringing it up because you're talking about landscaping and lawn mowing and all that.
I haven't even talked about lawn mowing. You brought lawn mowing. I've said landscaping. I've said landscaping. The problem is that, and I've been dealing with this issue with Susan for a while, there is a gray area. And the town attorney admitted it today. There's a gray area in that in that setup. And I'm not threatening, I'm not anything. That's what I'm trying to do. You're right. So you just said, if Mark, if you can do it, go do it, right? That's what you just said to me.
Yeah.
But if I go do it and people see it working, others are gonna do it.
You don't have a gas station where you want to put it in gas station. That won't hide it, and it will not.
Why don't you just build a house and go by the home occupation thing? So a little bit more
I
restrictive.
I can't because I'm on a shared driveway.
I got a question on that too, where Ed, you said commercial service home occupants shall not be permitted with a shared driveway.
Correct.
That's C5, right?
Correct.
But C2 says no more than 4 trips shall be generated per day from the site.
Right, I think.
So that limits,
Yeah,
Does
that
that-
limits the amount of people who can come in and out. There are also limits on the amount of equipment. There are limits on where the equipment can be
But
parked or
didn't
stored.
somebody just
And-
say that
and
we
all
could do as many
that's-
as we want? Didn't you just say, somebody said we could
No,
go in and out? So
not
you
for the
can't with
home
that. 'cause it's
occupation,
short.
no.
So the home
Those are
occup-
existing.
Okay,
the commercial services of landscape and contractors
It's under home occupation.
is under home occupations, but it has no mention of, like, this is, I see this as purely the grass cutting, the leaf cleanup. There's no agriculture on that, no agricultural aspect of their
On that
home
land at all.
occupation.
They could probably have it anyway, because you really do agriculture in any place.
Right, that's what, I think
So
that's
not
what
an
we're
issue.
saying
It's
is
just
currently,
limiting what you can do with this, and that's, I think, to protect the neighbors.
right, and I'm saying, I think currently there is no limitation on if a home occupation had a commercial agricultural aspect to it, no limitations on it.
So
As long as they're not
Well, there's
on
a lot
a
of
shared
people that have
driveway.
you're not on a
farms
shared
and-
driveway.
You can't have.
There are
you
limits
can't have
on
a-
storing.
you can't have a commercial agricultural on a shared driveway.
So
You can't have any home occupation on a shared driveway.
the home
Like, there's two
occupations,
different-
they talk about in the
Home
definition,
occupations
in the
include
beginning. It talks about the
commercial.
fact that a home occupation is defined as the use of a portion of a dwelling or an outbuilding for business purposes by the resident occupants when clearly incidental and secondary to the residential use. So the idea of that is that the primary use of the property is still residential.
Right.
And that you haven't changed the character of the neighborhood, you haven't changed the outward appearance of what's going on there.
But there's
And so
no-
that's why in C, when they talk about commercial services of off-site services, and it says, it says specifically landscaping and contractors, for examples.
Mhm.
But they're specific of no more than one resident vehicle parked on site, no more than 4 trips generated per day, no more than 3 vehicles in excess of 26,000 pounds. All vehicles and equipment, regardless of vehicle weight, shall be registered, operational, and stored out of sight of all property lines, and that commercial services home occupation shall not be permitted on a parcel with a shared driveway. And the idea of that is so that, it's not to stop someone from starting at home with a smaller business. And we
Yeah.
talked at the beginning about how important those small businesses are to our
Yeah.
town. But to also not change the residential, sort of neighborhood that you're in. No one should know that you're running that business. It should be that sort of invisible. If you have this few trips, if things are stored out of sight,
Mhm.
then it shouldn't be visible to your neighbors that you have something, if you have something that's to that level of a successive business, then we want you to move to, an appropriate commercial zone where, the traffic capacities are bigger because you're generating more trips. It might have to do with the bridge that you cross with your larger truck, or there are a lot of other pieces to that go on that have to do with sort of the intensity of that use,
But you
right?
still have the right to farm.
So you still have the right to farm, certainly, and that's preserved.
Right.
But that's really not a home occupation per
Right,
se.
so-
That's
so a right to farm
full-blown
doesn't-
agricultural
a-
use,
Of
Which is
agricultural use
shown-
doesn't fall into home occupation.
which is shown,
Correct.
the agricultural
Correct.
use, the pure agricultural use is shown in all of the zones across, all the residential zones of, so
Right.
you first and foremost, and even in the P O C D, there's a big emphasis on the agricultural heritage in North
Yeah.
Stonington, about the preservation of that agricultural heritage, about, many of the farms being multi-generational farms, large tracts of land, that we don't want that agricultural heritage to change, or for those larger tracts of land to be split. And we want to be able to continue that. And so a lot of what is in the P O C D and within your regulations, tries to be consistent with those objectives.
John, if I can real quick, I think where you're getting confused, and Ben, I'm probably gonna step on Ben here, is the stuff you just read, that's for home occupation, the 4 trips, all that. I'm not talking about home occupation. I can't do home occupation because it's on a shared driveway. I'm talking about the definition of commercial farming. That's the difference. And there is no regs, no guidelines on commercial farming.
How many trips they.
How many trips you can
go
take,
to the
how
commercial
far you
farm,
have to be
how-
from a sight line, how far you have to
where
be
your
from your
equipment's
neighbor.
stored.
There's no regs on that. And if, correct me if I'm wrong, Ed, your dairy farm under definition is a commercial farm. I mean, it's an agricultural farm, but it's a commercial farm. There's no regs on Ed's farm. So Ed's you're in an R80, correct? Okay. So what is the difference? Ed can run around there with, I'm just using you for example, Lewis's, Palmer's, I don't care, pick anybody. There's 1,000 tractors running around there. There's 1,000 employees running around there. There's 1,000 choppers. There's
There are
1,000.
not 1,000. I bet you don't, there aren't even 10 employees. Then, and when you display.
But listen,
But it's more than.
Pat, you're
the-
getting stuck in the 10 employees. It could be 6. I just, like I
It's more
said, these
than the
numbers
4
are just,
trips, it's more than.
it's more, what I'm saying, this commercial farming,
But this commercial farm may be in one area, but they're probably protecting hundreds, maybe thousands of acres throughout the town.
so you
And
mean,
then you're gonna have a 40 acre here and somebody on the same road's gonna have 40 acres and 40 acres and all this traffic going back and forth. That's
So-
different.
so you're going to tell me that you don't think the activity on Bloombridge Road from the Lewis farm operating is a massive amount of equipment moving up and down that road every single day?
There is, but I bet you this-
Traffic though, for people taking a shortcut, going over Boombridge Road into the backside of Westerly, and they own a whole bunch of land that is hopefully not gonna be developed. You know what I'm saying? So you have more cars, because I've been out there, you got more cars going through there than you've got farms.
That's true, because I live on Bluebird Road.
Fields on either side of the road.
Okay, so this is under the same right to farm. That's what I'm saying, is I'm covered the same as you. If I grow trees out there, I'm covered the same as you. I'm covered the same as Lewis's, Palmer, and
Well, do
whoever
it.
else.
Just do it then. How many tree farms do you know in Canada have a house?
But what, that doesn't matter, Cheryl. But
Well,
why
that's what we're
does it?
saying. There's currently nothing to place any bounds on anything.
Okay, so
It would have to be special permit, because if this was something that you
So what-
looked at,
yeah.
it would not work on every property.
Right.
Honestly, on Norwich Westerly Road, Richard White, would it work on his property?
Right.
Probably.
Right.
But it wouldn't, it's just like the farm winery. It would not work on every property.
So those are things that if you did a text amendment, that you could ask Mr. Perkins to either add into his proposal or say that those things are important to you. We've talked in concept here for almost an hour, so I think it would be good for the commission to let Mr. Perkins know if they would, and this doesn't have to be a formal vote, it's not that kind of thing. You need to let him know, should he, well, you should have a consensus, but it's not like, this isn't a public hearing, so you're not like saying, but it's not binding what you're saying, but it would be appropriate to say, we think you should go forward with this. We would advise you that we're going to be looking for these things, or we think these things would be important for you to have, in that regulation. And we would ask you, to look at those as part of what you're proposing. Or if you don't think that this is an appropriate thing to bring forward, I think you've been pretty good about the iterative loop of feedback here. But we've been here for almost an hour and this is only a workshop. This is not a public hearing. And so I want to, respect, that there are only two of us in this room who get paid to be here. Everyone else is here on a volunteer basis. And I myself have volunteered for many years in the positions that, on the other side of the table. So I want to respect the fact that most of you here are here as volunteers. So it would be good to give Mr. Perkins, sort of a go forward or we don't really think you should go forward, or a go forward, but do these items so that he knows how to proceed, because tomorrow when, or the next day when he comes into the office, we want to be clear with him on how we'd like him to move forward or stop or whatever. And that's the commission's purview.
I still have a lot of questions, Mark. And if you went forward right now, I don't think I would be too much scared. I want to deal with the town attorney, clarify some things. Property for quite some time. I know it's come to an end. I know you have a problem. I'm not trying to be a problem to you. I just don't want to mess up the town. Okay?
I'm not trying to rush it.
That's, trust me. I could help you out, I would. But I'm here because I just want to protect the town and what we have.
I'm not trying to rush it, Ed.
Step on your,
If you need to talk to, I'm not trying to rush this, like, I'm not trying to shove it down somebody's throat next month. If you say, Mark, 30 days, I want to talk to the town attorney. I mean, I would love in the next 30 days for you guys to jot questions down and email them to me.
and I wish there was more people here.
I as well, because I want as much feedback. I don't want, if this is somebody decided to do, I want it to be, like I said, this is my opinion. There's 5 opinions on it, but the workshop had to start somewhere where I hope to get questions from you and John and everybody, right? Because maybe I answer the questions and they answer questions in your head and it makes sense. I don't know, but I had to start somewhere bringing it to you guys. This is not something I'm saying 30 days from now. If it takes 6 months to iron it out, whatever it is, I don't want anybody to feel rushed.
I do not support it because, number one, you don't have to be a resident. Number two, we have home occupations that would protect our regulations, it protects people who live on the same road and live in a residential area. I bought a house on a place that had a landscaping commercial, and there were vehicles going back and forth all day and dust all day, and I turned around and sold the house before I even moved next to it.
Two quick answers. There's nothing saying you can't add into that you have to be a resident. And what you're not catching is the home occupation regs that you keep standing by do not apply to what I'm talking about. So
Well, I think the home occupation regs are adequate for North Flemington,
But-
and I don't support this. That's all I'm saying. Okay.
but the home occupation regs don't govern what we're talking about
Well,
here.
that's why I'm saying I don't support the change. That's all.
Oh,
So
Okay.
Pat, a different perspective, if these,
I
or
had too many concerns.
yeah, if some version of a limitation on what non-food producing commercial agriculture, I don't know. If some version of regulations existed that may have prevented or reduced the amount of traffic that was allowed by that person.
Well, no, and also, the large vehicles is near and making noise during the day or even on weekends in the morning when people are.
This isn't
Right,
set in
I
stone.
think this would,
I'm
some
just
version
telling
of
you
this
no,
would,
there's too many tweaks to make a whole new thing. I don't support changing what we have, that's all.
I agree with what I said. I just want to critique it a little
But
bit more.
please, jot down questions.
I don't wanna rush in and make a mistake and then have to come back and.
Not what I'm looking
have
for.
another public hearing and change something.
I'm not looking for this is not a quick fix. I understand that. I just needed to get it started so you guys can jot questions down, get them to Cheryl, get them to Susan.
I don't want people coming
Yeah.
From another town, from a commercial business on our
Yeah,
residential
that
zone
last-
and not even live here.
yeah, there's no reason
would be allowed on that parcel with a shared driveway. I mean, he may come forward with the regulation, but it may not fit on your parcel, but it may fit on
On
others.
others.
So it may not benefit you in the end.
And if it doesn't, it doesn't. But like I
Right.
said, I mean, it's, as it's currently open-ended. We'll leave it at that, but if you guys can get me your questions, hopefully next, what would it go from here, Susan? Another workshop, or how does that work?
Maybe when other more people were.
So you can certainly take, take the feedback that the commission members give you. We could have another workshop when there are more people or different people here. And you could refine, the concept that you're talking about. There's nothing that prevents that. There's no actual timeline. The state statutes under 87D only have timelines that have to do with when you've put in a formal application. So if you put in a formal text amendment, you put in a formal site plan, all of those have timelines that are prescribed by the state. To just have a workshop and to have a concept, you could come back, in 3 months from now and say, the commission members each gave me, these things, and I've refined my concept, and I'd like to talk about this concept. It's a little different than the last one. You talk about how, and you can discuss it again. That's certainly fine. And there are no actual timelines from a workshop or a concept sort of standpoint, because you haven't entered any of the sort of state refined, defined processes that have those specific time periods.
Okay, so I'll just wait to hear, for Ed and John some questions and,
To the members that weren't here.
sure, and then.
Oh, that would be very
May-
nice.
Maybe they
Or
can
they
add
can
some comments,
Look it
and
on
in
YouTube
a
too.
Yeah.
1 or 2 meetings, I can come back with more refined and say, I've answered some questions, you guys have had some more questions, and I'm in no rush whatsoever. Like you said, Ed, we've been at it for a while. I just trying to,
We have streamed this on YouTube, so it will be available on the town's website, so folks would be able to watch it. And then we also have taped it
I'll
digitally,
just tell them to watch it on
so
YouTube.
they can listen to it that way as well, so that the other members could listen to the discussion tonight, so that that part doesn't have to be repeated for those who weren't available. Okay?
Planning issues and discussion. Bond release request for Quinlan Enterprise LLC, 75 Frontage Road for SPL number 20-107 for a bond being held for erosion and sediment control and construction of stormwater management system.
So this was a bond that came up, and Cheryl called it to our attention.
Well, actually.
Oh,
the
okay, maybe you should.
bookkeeper Gives me a list of the bonds every year because the auditors are, why is this still here? And this is one that it's 5 years old.
And it's completely built out. There isn't anything,
Yeah,
everything's been done for a while.
it's just one,
So.
we forgot about it, he forgot about it. Almost $11,000.
So we're trying to close up our audit for the year and do that.
It needs a motion.
I have a motion for bond release request for Quinlan Enterprises
Yeah.
LLC.
I make a motion to release the bond for Quinlan Enterprises LLC on 75 Frontage Road for SPL number 20-107.
I do, yeah. It's just easier with Robert's rules. Yeah.
Okay, all those in favor?
Did
say
somebody
aye.
second it?
I- I-
Mark second.
Oh, sorry,
Sorry.
I didn't.
aye.
Now, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
The record shows.
Senior planner and zoning official report and issues.
It's been very busy in our office. It is, finally warmed up and stopped raining. We're generating a great number of permits. We've also had a fair number of complaints. Some of them are smaller issues, such as, bushes, blight. We do have a couple of bigger items. Some of them have been able to be solved just with inspections and discussions and review of regulations with folks. Sometimes folks just aren't aware that we have regulations for these things. Sometimes it's about animals or sometimes it's about, unregistered cars. It's usually just a phone call or a letter that, 90% of the things get cleaned up pretty quickly. I have a couple folks that I'm sort of passing on a regular basis because we're keeping an eye on them. If they're making progress, we sort of let things go as they make progress and we don't intervene again other than to say a phone call of, hey, you're doing a great job, please keep going, and we keep following it. We do our best to keep things at a pretty fast pace in terms of getting things cleaned up. And for the most part, people are pretty responsive. We do have a couple of things that are in the lawyer's lap, but we try to use that as a last ditch effort because we try not to waste the money of the town. And there are things left over from folks that, from before me that I have to continue that were already, in play. So, but it has been pretty busy lately. And I think just the nicer weather always helps. It brings people out and then they're checking on their neighbors on registered cars and, being worried about bushes that are growing again. And so we do go out and, check the complaints. We do ask folks, to let us know when they make a complaint, who they are, so we can, circle them back. I also, if they do make a complaint formally, we do copy them, on the letter that we send or the query so that they have that information too. So, and sometimes there are some funny things that happen. We had one this month about a private cemetery and historic burial grounds that are even on private properties. You still have to be able to go in and maintenance them. The town has a cemetery commission. So that's something, that we deal with a tiny bit here and there because those are protected by both federal and state laws. But also we have a responsibility as a town to maintain those burial grounds. So, as spring has sprung, these things, we've been pretty busy. So if you wanted to ever to know about anything specific or any specific case, you can always give me a call. Almost all of our files are digital, so it's very easy to, send an email or to include you on any piece of information that we have in terms of an application, the history of a property, pictures, that kind of thing. Okay.
New applications? Old business? New business?
The minutes are really a 410. I copy and paste.
Review minutes of the meeting for 4/10/2025.
You would have read them in April. Pat, if you read them and found something wrong, you would have emailed me.
Oh, yeah, I did read this.
No, we don't make a motion. They're just accept them.
Yeah.
It's different.
I got to accept
Yeah.
it
You
second.
only make a motion if you're making corrections.
Oh,
Motion to adjourn.
second?
Seconded by Mark.
Oh, John.
I made a motion to adjourn. Mark Perkins seconded.
I don't get to sit very often. Let me get my name on the record.
All in favor?
Yeah, every board. I've always had minutes, the motion is second. Everyone that comes to the elder, every time you guys can do that. Sorry,
It was hard, we did it.
Yeah.
Right.
That was the